Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, in each episode, I discuss different topics from emerging technology, and under that comes anything like AI, HR tech, ed tech, and sometimes also I talk about startups and the founders behind them. And today it's one of these episodes where we're going to talk about startups, entrepreneurship, and also legal tech, which is a topic first time I discuss on the show. And I'm pleased to have with me Charles Brecque, who's joining me live today. Charles, thank you for being on the show. If you can just, introduce yourself and a little bit about your startup.
Well, thank you very much, Mehmet, for having me. So I'm Charles, founder of Legislate. I'm not a lawyer, but in my previous role in business development, I dealt with a lot of contracts, and I just found the whole process very painful and inefficient. And I studied engineering, so the engineer in me wanted to come up with a better way of uh, not just creating contracts, but also making the data in the contracts searchable and usable. Because we were dealing with PDFs, Word documents, and it's a real nightmare to extract even just a start date from those documents. And at the time, I was based in Oxford, where there's a whole bunch of AI companies being spun out of the university, and technology that I sort of came across is a technology called knowledge graphs, which is a branch of AI which does the opposite of machine learning. It's basically a smart database which allows you to model data as relations as opposed to within a schemas. And in addition to those relations, you can introduce reasoning, which allows you then to find more patterns or infer new relations in your data or create new data. And if you think about a contract is a bunch of relations, there are concepts. And at the time, it just seemed like a great way to, knowledge graphs seemed like a great way to model contracts. And therefore, have with a superior model, we could automate contracting better. But we could then also make that data searchable and allow companies to answer questions about their contracts. So that was 3 years ago. We're now a team of 20 almost, and working with over 200 clients. And yeah, here we are today on the CTO show.
That's great story to hear, Charles. Charles, what was the main motivation for you? Did you see something you faced yourself? Because usually founders, they are eager to find problems, right? So they can out to their customers. So what was the main reason for you to start your company?
Yeah. So when I was doing business development at the startup, I was responsible for finding clients, but then also making sure that we could send a contract to them and act on any amendments or requests or changes. Um, and so the problem was that we were waiting for legal to review documents, and only the legal team could sort of decide if the document was valid. And then post signature, the problem was my finance director, my customer success team, and the CEO. Everyone wanted to know what was in the contract, even though they had copies of the PDF. So I had to each time go in the document, extract the data, email it to them, share it to them. So it just seemed very efficient. It seemed like I was wasting a lot of time, and we were losing. Time is the biggest killer of deals. So we were losing
Yep.
opportunities because how long contracting would take. And so ultimately, it was a real problem that I was experiencing firsthand. And when I did look for solutions, a lot of legal tech solutions were sort of aimed at legal teams or lawyers, but I wasn't a lawyer. And ultimately, there weren't really any platforms out there that were sort of geared towards business users that were involved in the contracting process. So that's why I felt like it was a great opportunity to start Legislate.
That's great. So I can understand that your target audience are the businesses, not the lawyers, right?
Exactly.
Okay. That's good to hear. Now, yeah, your company focus on very important aspect, which is the contracts. But where do you see, like more use cases is for legal tech in general to go to the market and, come out with other solutions? Where do you see still some gaps in that space?
I think, as I said, a lot of legal tech is very much focused on legal teams or lawyers. And that's partly because when legal tech a lot of legal techs are founded by lawyers. So lawyers view the problem from their own angle and own perspective, which is very different from the perspective that I have because I'm not a lawyer and I experienced the problem from the perspective of someone who was working with lawyers. So um, I guess that's sort of a key thing, which means that legal tech solutions developed by lawyers tend to optimize lawyers and therefore require a lawyer in the loop. And there aren't that many lawyers, so um, I think there's obviously a lot of room for disruption with being able to uh, scale legal expertise with AI. But I do think though that that model will still have its own limits because um, AI will never be, or at least machine learning based models will never be 100% accurate. And therefore, you'll need some legal expert to sort of validate anything that's coming out of those models. So um, I think actually, legal tech is often associated with contracts, contract automation, data in the contracts, etc. But I also think there's lot of opportunity um, in even just improving legal processes for government forms or um, you know compliance, reg tech. I think if you
Mhm.
broaden the definition of legal tech, I think there's a lot of opportunity, it's not necessarily a super sexy domain, but there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of pain. Yeah.
Great insight. Now, Charles, this is maybe it came a traditional question, but you have a piece of machine learning, you have a piece of AI, uh, actually in any technology. But now we talk about legal tech, and like any other vertical, I would say the question that is now becoming very common: oh, these technologies might be able to eliminate some jobs, right? So do you see really this is happening, especially, we talk about legal tech here and, the impact of these technologies in general. From your point of view, first, like someone who now developed these software, these solutions for your clients. Second, from a founder perspective as well, because I'm sure that you as founder, you need some legal help. So how do you see, the impact on the jobs in legal and in general?
Yeah, I don't think many legal jobs will be disrupted. To be honest, I think it might be more um, on the processing front or the back end front. Because I do think that at least ChatGPT and OpenAI they've made certain manual repetitive tasks very easy to automate. Um, for example, uh, if you've got an email, extract the website domain. So I think
Mhm.
this obviously doesn't apply to legal, but it's a manual task which doesn't require much intelligence or thought or creativity, and I think any repetitive task around the processing of the data where you're not required to provide any creative input, those jobs are at risk of being automated. But the reality is legal is quite a creative field. The value of a lawyer isn't necessarily generating a document; it's telling you which document to generate. And whilst an AI might be able to give you some insights, the reality is people still want that legal advice in the same way that if you went to a dentist and you'd want to interact with a human, not with an AI. The AI might augment the dentist and help find problems that they might not see straight away. It might help them identify the problems faster. But I think, at least in the legal domain, the legal work as we know that lawyers do probably won't get disrupted. But if there's any sort of back office automation, then I think that's where there'll be some disruption. And then from the founder's perspective, I'm definitely looking to make myself more efficient using AI and even just trying to look at my workflows and see, well, okay, what could I automate or what could I improve? Um, Even just using tools like Zapier or NAN, and there is a lot that you can do without AI just to save time. But I think again, where I found AI useful is more being able to interpret data, process it, get it into the right shape to make decisions. And I don't know if we'll necessarily replace any roles. I don't think we'll do that, but I'm looking at to make myself more efficient, so that I can have more time.
Yeah, great answer also, I would say. And a lot of guests on the show, they mentioned something very similar because people now talking about the concept of augmenting, the augmentation aspect, as you gave the example of the dentist. And this might apply to any job actually, which is true. Now, before I move to your story as a founder and the entrepreneurship, last thing regarding, from technology perspective, especially in the legal field, what are your expectations from the trends perspective? Like, what's next? Like, what could be the next big thing when it comes to legal tech?
I think my view is quite biased, but I do think that um, a lot of legal tech has been very much focused on the generation of documents or the being able to output documents quickly, and therefore automate a process with PDFs. Whereas I think that's great, but you can't actually build anything with PDFs or on top of PDFs. And so we're making those PDFs machine readable using knowledge graphs, and I think that sort of opens up a whole new range of opportunities because you can build on top of a knowledge graph. So I think there's a lot of potential to build applications on top of contracts which are machine readable, whether that's integrating payments, whether that's integrating compliance. And I think if we take a step back and look at what fintech is, as why fintech exists, it mainly exists because of open banking and the ability to make bank accounts machine readable. So I think if we can do the same for contracts, it's going to sort of disrupt the industry. And I don't know if the industry is ready for it, but it's at least the direction that we're trying to create.
Yeah, that's good. Now, moving forward to being an entrepreneur and a first time founder, what are some of the challenges and you know some what is for sure now for you is lessons you can a little bit share with us? So maybe now you say, okay, I wish I knew this before I started it. So if you can tell us a little bit about this, so people who are thinking to start their own businesses can get some insights from.
Yeah, I think I'm a first time founder. I'm also a solo founder. So I think the first challenge is always, and I don't think it's much easier when you have a co founder, but getting your first hires is always a challenge. Um, and I think hiring is always going to be a challenge. And the reality is um, hiring is one of those topics where you think you know it until you actually do it, and then it doesn't work out. And the reality is it doesn't work out more often than you think. So I think hiring has definitely been a challenge for us. Um, and part of it is being able to now with this all this learnings as well, working out how do we know if the candidate is going to be a good fit from a cultural perspective, from a role perspective, from a competency perspective. I think we're definitely much better at um, being able to sort of predict that. But the reality is even if you're selecting 1% or 0.1% of candidates, you're still going to have a failure rate of maybe 20%, regardless of how much you do. And um, I think what's important then is to be able to act quickly. And you definitely don't want to, to have an environment where you unfortunately don't let go of people, because if you do that, then you're at risk of creating a culture or an environment which is hurting the company. So I guess, yeah, hiring is a key issue. You will get it wrong, and if you get it wrong, then you need to act quickly. I think that's sort of the key takeaway for today.
When you mentioned hiring, was that finding developers, or was it for sales, or is it all of that?
I think the role you're hiring for will always have a impact, or it will always be different because I think developers are looking for something completely different from salespeople. I think the sales is an area where we have always struggled to attract great salespeople, and I think That's something which a lot of companies can relate to. Um, I think on the tech front, it's sort of cyclical. Um, there have been times where we've struggled to get candidates, but then there are times where we've got too many. Um, but I'd say probably have had better success hiring developers than hiring any other roles. Um, but I'd say part of that is also that it's much easier to sort of assess the competency of a developer based on the tech stack and what you're looking for. Um, and maybe also like the mindsets of developers is also maybe different from um, a more commercial role. I don't think necessarily developers are trying to sell themselves in an interview. They're very raw or authentic generally. So so you're less likely to be misled and then after the hire realize that actually this person is not who they said they were. And I'm not saying that commercial people do this deliberately, but I do feel like there's maybe more of a tendency to um, and employers do the same. Employers also pitch themselves during the interview process. But I feel like for commercial roles where it's more subjective. There's less objective data. You're more likely to end up in a unsatisfactory situation.
Yeah, makes sense. I used to work in like tech sales. Let's put it in this context, and I can relate to what you are saying now, Charles. So yeah, and I was purely tech before, and everyone pitch, his or her story. But yeah, like salespeople do that more, and this part actually what they should have been doing all the time, right? So to get in front of the right, um, employers that they wish to work with. Now, I believe you have raised some funds for the company, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the question is, and this is I'm making it kind of the common question on the pod, why you raise versus not bootstrapping? I'm a little bit curious to know more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, although I studied engineering, I I'm not a developer, um, and I think had I been a developer, then I would have been tempted to um, I would say necessarily bootstrap, but at least progress the product further um, and maybe independently. But I think in our case, well, A, I'm not a developer. B, knowledge graph technology is very niche. I know that there are lots of no code solutions out there, but you can't just plug a no code tool into a knowledge graph and then start building on the knowledge graph. So that was like one other reason why we needed um, tech support and tech support, unfortunately, well, is a reality requires some form of funding. So um, I went down the angel route to start with, and then after we had a product and some initial traction, went down the venture route. So we raised in total 4 million. We've just closed a 3 million round, and I'd say I obviously admire founders who managed to bootstrap, and I'm very jealous of those founders. But I think the reality is every business is different. Every founder or group of founders is different, um, and we're also dealt different cards. I started the company with 3 years of professional experience, whereas maybe had I started the company later, I would have been able to self fund. Maybe I don't know. So I think it's just one of those things where funding changes for every single company and startup and founder. And once you're dealt with a set of cards, you do, I guess, need to go down a certain route. But yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong um, answer or solution to funding.
No, definitely there is no right or wrong answer to this. And each founder that I have interviewed on the podcast, they had their own reasons why they went to this route or that route, which is, as you said, it depends on each kind of business, the ambition that they had, and their business model. I believe, Charles, your model is a SaaS model, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I know it's your first startup, but what made the SaaS model attractive to you?
I think software is great because um, you you don't need to physically ship it. It can sort of run independently. And I guess in our case, uh, contracts are, even though sometimes they are printed, contracts are mostly digital. So it made sense to be sort of in the, you know, create software to deal with contracts. Um, but I think when I started the company 3 years ago, it was also the beginning of the pandemic, and um, it really increased the awareness or adoption of online or remote contracting. Um, and so, it just made sense to have a SaaS platform to sort of deal with that. But obviously there are all sorts of benefits of SaaS, um, whether it's on the support front or it's on the financial front. And yeah, I guess it's a great model if it makes sense.
Yeah, indeed. It's like, you know, on the long run, it's a proven uh, business model, I would say, because it's like about the recurring revenue. Now, any business, whether you are new or you've been sometimes in the market, everyone worries about competition, right? So, for you, how do you look from a founder perspective to the competition? Like, how do you deal if someone maybe took one of your features and they cloned it, or maybe they cloned the whole system even? Like, what's your point on this? What you can tell other founders about this?
Well, fortunately, that hasn't happened to us yet, because I feel like whilst the legal tech market can be seen as crowded, I agree it's crowded for legal tech for lawyers and law firms, whereas in our space, there aren't that many solutions aimed at businesses. And even since starting the company, I haven't recently seen any that have sort of come up that are trying to approach the problem or the framing as like we are. So I guess it's not necessarily a situation that we've encountered. But I think competition is great because ultimately it validates that there is a market, that there is demand. And even though we haven't really figured everything out, if there are competitors that are a bit further along the road, then maybe there are lessons that we can learn from them. Um, and and therefore competition is great. But I think fortunately we don't sort of encounter our competitors in head to head deals. I'd say more recently we've sort of been picking up dissatisfied clients from some of the more established competitors. But generally, I think competition is great. It proves there's a market, um, and and therefore, if your competitor is spending millions on marketing to create awareness for your problem, then that's millions of marketing that you don't need to spend yourself. So, um, I think it's good.
Great, great to know. And yeah, I agree with you. If competition is always good, and I say competition is always good for both the startup and for the clients, because at the end of the day, the goal of any startup, of course, you want to generate money, you want to be successful, but the product should be helping customers, and competition encourage that. I agree with you 100%. Now, as a founder, Charles, like I, I always ask this question because now I'm into a startup mode myself. Like I don't have a SaaS product or anything, but maybe trying one day. What is the number one, thing that you always keep thinking about it all the time?
I think right now it's always thinking about customers and getting more customers. I think especially because we have evolved the product and as we've grown, focused on a broader group of customers or a different group of customers. Seeing that it will work with this new group of customers is something that um, or I'm always sort of aware of and thinking of. And then the more customers we have, the more um, the more investors we can get, etc. So I think right now it's all down to customers. But before that, it was all about investors. But it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem because to get investors, you need customers, and sometimes to get customers, you need investors. So yeah, I guess customers is all I think about right now.
I like this customer centric approach. Now, last question before I gonna kind of uh, conclude and close. What is the next for your company? What's the next step?
Yeah. So I think we've been very much focused on the UK, and there's still a lot more to do in the UK. But we've also been making lots of improvements to the products so that we can start to think beyond the UK. So um, I think the US is a market that's very interesting. So is Australia. So is Europe. So I guess as we sort of grow and expand, we can start to expand internationally. But that's more on, I guess, on where we're going physically. And then on the product side, we're really trying to build more integrations because if you think about a contract, it needs to go through many different tools and platforms. And so we're trying to integrate with uh, tools so that our clients can sort of have full visibility of their contract, regardless of whether they're using Legislate or not.
To know a traditional question again on the pod before we close, Charles. Anything that you wished I asked?
Um, I guess how to find us.
Hey, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is usually how I close, but yeah, feel free.
Okay, well, you can find us by searching Legislate, and it will go to legislate.ai.
That's great. Usually, what I do, Charles, is that I will put the URLs in episode description that will go
Oh,
on both YouTube and the podcasting platforms as well. Well, like I really enjoyed this chat with you today, Charles. Like legal tech is something which I believe also, and I can call you a first mover in this space because it's not crowded as, for example, something like fintech, which is so crowded now. So congratulations, and I wish you all the success on that. And as I said, I will be sharing, you know, the company URL in my YouTube channel description and on the podcasting platforms description as well. Thank you very much, everyone who also tuned in today. As usual, if you have any feedback or questions about this episode or the show in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can send me an email. You find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Also, if you are interested, like Charles today, to be a guest, be more than happy to send me an email or again reach me by the social media. We can discuss this and we can arrange for that. And don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you very much to tuning today, and we will meet in a next episode. Thank you.
thank you.